Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hutch's Garage. This story is about a garage rescue of a 1946 International Harvester Corporation Model LB engine that began in 2016. But the story really goes back long before that year. The engine was originally owned by my maternal grandfather. It remained on the farm ever since, passing on to my uncles who continued to live on the property. I learned about the engine around 1980. My uncles knew that I was interested in old antique engines, and so they showed it to me when I visited them with my mom and dad. The garage was in good shape at the time when I first saw it. The engine was sitting on the concrete floor of the garage on the south side, near a door. It was in good physical shape, with the original red paint still on it. This aerial photo shows the farmstead as it looked during the 1980s. In this photo is the old garage shown under the arrow, and the house that my mom grew up in. Fast forward to 2016 when my uncle, who was the only person left living in the house, was on his deathbed. I went to visit him in the hospital. He told me that if there was anything I wanted on the farm, to go ahead and take it. My uncle had sold the farm to the Indiana Department of Natural Resources, the DNR, a few years earlier. He was allowed to live out the rest of his life on the property, and after he would pass, the property would then be turned over to the DNR. We were told that most, if not all, of the buildings would be razed. I had told my uncle that I always had wanted that International Harvester engine once they were done with it. From his hospital bed, my uncle gave me the approval to go get it, which I did. Shortly after seeing him, I went out to the farm with my brother. The garage at this time had deteriorated and the roof was falling in, as can be seen in this photo. The trees and brush are crowding in around it. It took a good while to find the engine, but I eventually found it on the south side in the rear doorway, as can be seen as we move in with these photos. In this photo, you can barely see the engine behind the sheet metal and all of the junk on top of it. A skid loader was pulled up close to the doorway, and I lifted the engine into the bucket of the skid loader. The engine was placed into the back of my Jeep. And I brought it home and unloaded it and hung it up in the air. I took a hose and washed it down with water, and as you can see in these pictures, the skids and the fuel tank were almost entirely rusted away. The engine was locked up and I couldn't turn it over. From this review, you can see the Magneto cap, and it's cracked and let water into the Magneto, which we'll find out later was the cause of a big problem. Here we have the belt pulley, the exhaust muffler, what's left of it. The outer part is gone. Another view of the damaged fuel tank and skids. Another closer view. I took the valve cover off, and you can see the rocker arms in this picture. They even have their red paint on them. Another view of that, you can see the spark plug wire and the spark plug and the oiling pipe. Another close-up view of the push rods and the rocker arms. I took the rear cover off the engine and looked inside, and it looked pretty good inside actually. There was very little rust. Here's an upper view inside the engine, looking at the camshaft through the crank throw. The very next day after I picked up the engine, I went to the Tri-State Gas Engine and Tractor Show in Portland, Indiana, and picked up a new gas tank, some used skids, and some other various parts for the engine. Because the engine was locked up, I took off the head and looked at the piston and cylinder walls, and also discovered that the valves were free, so nothing really was much problem there. There was very little rust inside. So I then took off the magneto, and moving the flywheel back and forth, I found that the engine was now free. It was the magneto that was locked up. Because of water coming through the cracked cap, it had frozen the magneto such that it wouldn't turn, not allowing the engine to turn over at all. So I took it apart and started cleaning it up and discovered I needed to replace the coil, the points and condenser, and also the magneto impulse spring was cracked in several places. So I bought those parts, put them in, and also bought a new cap for the magneto and tested it on a bench. After that, I decided to put it back on the engine to see if the engine was worth restoring, see if the engine would start. So I got a small plastic container to put gas in, hooked a hose up to the existing check valve going to the mixer, and attempted to start the engine, and this is the result. After I knew that the engine would run, it was now time to start taking the engine apart to restore it and clean it up and eventually paint it. First thing I did was take off the flywheel. And then we took off the side cover that has the main crankshaft bearing and the camshaft bearing, and exposes the governor so you can see it. And here we have a picture of the side with the gears and a close-up of the governor as we get farther down here. The next thing to be removed was the camshaft. Then I took apart the governor and eventually pulled the crankshaft out and removed the piston and piston rod. After taking the engine completely apart, it was now time to clean all the various parts of the engine block, and I started ordering parts for it. One of the things I ordered was new seals for where the shafts come out of the body for the belt pulley and also the output of the crank to the flywheel. The center wall showed a good amount of wear, so I used a hone and a drill and hone the cylinder wall down to a point where I believe it'll give good compression. After cleaning, repairing, and priming certain parts, I took all the parts and laid them out on the floor, as you can see in these following two photos. These are all the parts that it takes to put together an International Harvester LB engine. Thank you for watching this video. Please stay tuned for the next episode on this 1946 International Harvester LB engine rebuild. This is my first YouTube video, and if you like this video, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I have planned for future videos on my 1954 International Harvester Farmall Super MTA tractor. Please join me as I give a history of this tractor and will then begin a rebuild of the tractor.